Gadget's field trip.
We're going on a visit.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Come on, let's go with him.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
What's that, you ask? What is it?
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Well, no one wants to miss it.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
We're going on a visit.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Come on, let's go with
New
him.
places, new faces. Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Inspector Gadget here with a top-secret field trip message from the chief. Ye jolly old Englishmen of Williamsburg, Virginia, should watch out for horse-drawn carriages. Obviously, the chief is communicating in top-secret code. There isn't a jolly old Englishman's horse in sight. Except that one. Look at the strange clothing on these people. My keen sense of detection reveals that we're in Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia. Apparently, time stood still here in the middle 1700s. That was over 200 years ago, which in dog years just happens to add up to, a lot. Let's take a George Washington's eye view at this extraordinary place. From 1699 to 1776, Williamsburg was the capital of England's oldest, largest, richest, and most populated colony, Virginia. Not only that, but they serve a mean Virginia peanut soup. Guess that makes Williamsburg the colony that sticks to the roof of your mouth. As you can see, Williamsburg is full of old shops, taverns, government buildings, and homes. It was also up to its ears in old fathers of the United States. In old times, the old fathers got together in these old buildings to come up with a new form of government. I have no idea what the mothers were doing. My great-uncle, Quillpin Gadget, actually served as a human blotter for the Constitution. I understand he wore clothes just like this, which made the owners of the clothing a little upset. He changed his name to Old Inkblot and became a town crier, which was a big drain on the town Kleenex supply. Kids had a lot of interesting games back then. You can still play this in Colonial Williamsburg today, since it's a very special place, frozen in time, though not at all cold. Here's a blacksmith warming up for a hard day's work. The smithy makes all sorts of practical things, like horseshoes. The other things were considered less practical by the horses. Horse sandals never caught on. In colonial days, they didn't have cars, so they used horses and carriages to get around. The shoes were for the horses, not the carriages. Most boys drove their father's carts at the age of 10, and they didn't have to take a driver's test. As to the minimum driving age for horses, your guess is as good as the old inspector's. Wowzers! Look at those huge horses. They must wear size 13 Triple E horseshoes. Oh, those aren't horses, they're oxen. They were used to plow the fields and transport heavy carts to market. This is the carpenter's lumber and brickyard, where they needed clay to be molded into bricks. Of course they needed clay. You don't make bricks out of lumber. This loaf of clay can easily be mistaken for a loaf of bread until you try eating it. Chewy, but not very nutritious. You have to get your roughage somewhere. Would you believe these carpenters are making barrels? Would you believe recycling popsicle sticks? How about making skis for anthills? They didn't have machines to do the work for them back in the 18th century. Everything was made by hand, except the hands. After watching all that hand labor, I'm starving. Let's stop at the King's Arms Tavern for a bite to eat. Hope they're not serving the King's Arm. The King wouldn't be too happy about that. Come to think of it, the King wasn't too happy about a lot of things. He lived in far-off England, and the colonies were out of arm's reach. After a quick bite of King's Arm, that's the daily special, it's nice to relax with the colonial version of the hula hoop. Only they did it the hard way with an iron hoop. Everyone pitched in to help in colonial days, even the kids. There were vegetables to be picked, clothes to wash, dinner to cook, and hoops to hula. Did you know that the average family had 6 or 7 kids, all living in a small house with no indoor bathroom? Undoubtedly, these kids are asking directions to the nearest public restroom. No horses allowed. The good news was there were no public schools in Virginia until after the Civil War. The bad news is they didn't get to play hooky. Most children had tutors or were schooled at home, so they still learned the 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and raise your hand to go to the outhouse. In the 18th century, half of the population of Williamsburg was black. In fact, the first Africans were brought over in 1619 as slaves. Their hard work was directly responsible for the settlement's success. 200 years ago, everyone was polite. They all tipped their hats to one another. Of course, if I do that, my gadgets fall out. When there's a wig, there's a way. A lot of the more well-to-do people wore wigs all the time, even the men. We can guess that they wore their hats to keep their wigs warm, and they tipped their hats to cool them off. The men and women shaved their heads so it would be more comfortable to wear the wigs. I don't get it. They shaved off perfectly good live hair to cover their heads with old hair. And then they powdered the wig hair to make it look better, or more old. Williamsburg was more than just another pretty place. It played an important part in America's decision to fight for independence from Great Britain. This is the Capitol building where the 5th Virginia Convention met for an historic decision. No, it had nothing to do with powdered wigs. They voted to break away from Great Britain and become independent. That brought lots of changes, which hopefully included indoor plumbing. This also included building an army here at the Yorktown encampment. The American Revolution was a long and difficult war. When the United States finally won its independence, this is where the British troops surrendered to General and First President George Washington. On October 18, 1781, America was born. Yorktown is now preserved as a camp for everyone to visit. Here are 2 soldiers showing what they learned at Yorktown. Soldier stuff. These are either the Bells of Freedom, a cheap remake of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, or my Gadget alarm clock gone haywire. I'm gonna have to get that alarm fixed. You too can sign up to learn soldier stuff at Yorktown. Classes include Marching 101, musket drills, and advanced cannon firing. Mess hall messing around is optional, but very satisfying. That's what happens when you fail your soldier stuff classes. Actually, these are tourists having a good time. To each his own. I guess the snack bar was closed. Back in Revolutionary War times, these stockades are where the bad guys and gals were locked up. I hope you had a good time on our field trip. Go, go, Gadget field trip.
Beak.